We're going to be discussing the Vendor Center. So selecting Transactions tab, we go to Vendors. We're going to be looking at Jackson. They're an existing vendor that provides dishwashing equipment. Big carriers that do a lot of dishes in a short period of time. So let's start with the General tab. Here we see the address, the phone, the fax as a display only. Here is the AutoQuote link to this vendor. So when we do a project, AutoQuote sees that we already have that vendor and they won't try to create a new vendor. Here's the email address and website address. Now, if I look at my details, this is where when I click edit, I have the ability to put in the address, the terms. If we click edit here, we have unlimited amount of user definable terms. We set the credit limit that Jackson has given us. We are in the Pride buyer group with this vendor, and this is the GL account for accounts payable. In this case, my vendor SKU and my SKU are the same. So return days for stock, this is where they tell us how long before we no longer can return items that we purchased and didn't sell. So we're going to say 30 days. My default shipping ID is UPS, and if I drill down here, here's all the ones that are user definable again. We're not using the AutoQuote SKU definition. This is where if we wanted to, it would allow us to automatically create a vendor ID as the next vendor ID, and in this case we're using the AutoQuote vendor IDs. For remit tender, we are normally using our Huntington checking account, and we have the phone, the fax, the email address, which I've used mine so we can send emails and I could get them, and the web address of the vendor. Here is my tax ID, and my tax ID expires on October 31st. And on Jackson's books, their accounts receivable people have this as our account number. Okay, so we're going to hit save here. Let's look at contacts. Here's where we can add additional contacts. We have Judy as the accounting manager and Mr. Shula as our support team leader. We can get a hold of them if we need to with questions or ask for support. Addresses, you can create many addresses. This particular address is where I send all my RMAs. It's not the corporate address, it's a warehouse down the road from their location. Purchase orders, this will show you any purchase orders that are currently in play. Items on PO would show what items that we're currently ordering. AP payments, this were payments that we've made in the past, and it shows the dollar amounts, how much we paid, and what the accounting checkbook was. It was the Huntington checkbook, and here's the check numbers. Under notes, we have information that we want to link to this company. In this case, there was a new vice president by the name of Steve Willoughby, and it tells us some information about that. It also here with a fellow by the name of Jonathan Aiken. He's been named the president of the company. So this kind of information, notes, helps us before we make our call and kind of brings us up to date to where we are. Documents, we have two documents here. We have the April price guide, and if we want to look at that, just by clicking launch, we'll get to see what the price guide was. And it's got the different list prices and things like that. So that's there to be printed out if we wanted to. We also have the conveyor motor replacement. We could print this out for a serviceman, and you take a peek at that. And this is a little bit on how this is done, step by step. And these can be added to the Jackson equipment. We also have a thing called vendor incentives. With vendor incentives, we're saying that if we purchase this much from Jackson, they'll give us a rebate based on these levels. Also, we can set up an ad and set up a free freight point and set that point at $10,000. So as long as we've reached $10,000, we'll get free freight when we do our purchase orders. So this is kind of how the vendor center has all the information. And again, with clicking vendor inventory, we get to see only Jackson's inventory. We can print labels. As I mentioned before, we can look at PO history and what was on each purchase order. And that's pretty much everything. We certainly can go right to payables from here if we needed to, and that would take us into our accounts payable system. So that's the vendor center.